and welcome to today's Vexploration on Goals. I'm Brent Peckover, and I'll be your guide for this Vexploration. This is the first Vexploration in a series of 3 discussing accountability. If we want to hold people accountable for achieving results, we have to create a common understanding of what our desired results are. If you don't know where you're going, any path may get you there. In Leadership Without Excess, How to Create Accountability and High Performance Instead of Just Talking About It, by Greg Barron, the author recounts a story of an officer training school class who was taken out of the classroom for the day to learn how to provide sufficient direction to a sergeant and her platoon. The task was to erect a flagpole. Learning was initiated by asking the question, what direction should you give to the sergeant to stand up this flagpole? The class was broken into groups of 3, and they had a short period of time to develop their response, after which they had to present their plan to the other students. The story focuses on one particular group, composed of a mechanical engineering student, a civil engineering student, and a student who had worked building electrical power line towers over the summer. With this complement of skills, they were convinced they would win the competition. The mechanical engineer calculated the drag the wind would exert on the flag at the top of the flagpole. The civil engineer examined the soil and calculated the required depth and amount of concrete necessary to hold up the flagpole when the flag was flapping in a stiff wind. The third student had a secret weapon. During his summer work, he had learned a neat trick with a plumb bob to help ensure the pole was perfectly straight up and down. They negotiated to present last so that no one could leverage their work. When it was their turn, they stood up and walked the class through their process. During their presentation, they could slowly see the other class members, one by one, nodding their head and quietly admitting defeat. The team wrapped up their presentation by providing detailed instructions to the sergeant on what her team needed to do to properly stand up the flagpole. The instructor stood up. Thank you. Your presentations were all very good. However, the team knew they had put forth the best answer to installing the flagpole, so they prepared to jump up and accept their victory. The instructor continued, However, you have all failed. The team was dumbfounded. Their answer would have resulted in a perfectly straight, well-anchored flagpole. After the class quieted down, the instructor explained, The correct answer is, Sergeant, put up this flagpole. Report to me when you're finished. If you have questions, I'll be in the mess hall drinking my coffee. In this case, the officer assigns the sergeant a goal and gets out of the way. Let's talk about the goal that is assigned to the sergeant for a minute. Is it a SMART goal? SMART is an acronym for specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. Each of these characteristics plays an important role. Are you establishing SMART goals for your staff? What about for yourself? Let's look at each of these parameters closely. Specific. This defines what the goal is and is not. It should narrowly define success in an unambiguous way. For example, we're not looking to increase profit. We're looking to grow profit margins in the light aircraft instrument market by the end of Q3 this year. Measurable. Success needs to be quantifiable. If the goal's objectives cannot be measured, it is very difficult to identify if actions being taken are resulting in improvement and when the results are sufficient such that resources can be redeployed onto the next goal. Feedback is the breakfast of champions. Are you on the right path? How do you know when you have achieved success? For example, increasing profits versus increasing profit margins by 25%. If Q1 profit margins increase by 0.01%, you know you're not likely to hit your goal by Q3 if the same incremental performance continues. Attainable. Does the person being assigned the goal believe the goal can be achieved? What about the person assigning the goal? If the goal being set is a pipe dream, then everyone is wasting their time, resources are being squandered, client relationships will likely be tarnished, and staff are going to be set up for disappointment and failure. Realistic goals are good. Realistic goals with an added stretch goal are even better. We'll talk about stretch goals in a minute. Relevant. How does the goal fit into the team's goals, the supervisor's or manager's goals, and the organization's strategic goals? Nothing is more demoralizing than realizing you're working on a make-work task that no one cares if you succeed or fail at. Time-bound. Goals without a plan and timeline are really dreams. By when should this goal be achieved? If this goal is supporting the accomplishment of other goals, its completion will impact the completion of the other goals. Remember Parkinson's Law? Work expands to fit the time allotted. Set slightly aggressive internal timelines. Under-promise, over-deliver. Goals cannot be set in a vacuum. They shouldn't be handed down from on high. We need staff to feel a sense of ownership and buy-in for the goal. So how do we instill a sense of ownership and buy-in? Dialogue. While managers and supervisors are best equipped to start the conversation about the desired targets and how they relate to the higher level objectives, staff need to have input into the resources required, timelines, quantity of output, and expected level of quality. They need to understand the constraints they are expected to work within. Accountability Leadership by Gerald Cranes defines this as QQTR, or quantity, quality, time, and resources. In Leadership Without Excess, Greg Barron talks about 4 key aspects of this discussion: conditions under which success could be declared, constraints under which you will work, offering just enough support and avoiding micromanagement, stretching the person's capability without exceeding them. This input is also valuable to the manager, as staff often have additional insight and skills to bring to bear on the problem. This can help develop and refine the manager's master plan by identifying new risks, reprioritizing intermediate milestones to enable learning to occur earlier in the process, identifying shortcuts that could be taken to achieve the goal more quickly, or backup plans that could be used if initial efforts don't pan out as expected. Dialogue is a critical part of goal setting and accountability. We spoke about situational leadership developed by Ken Blanchard and Paul Hershey in our Vexploration on the role of the leader. Part of our role as the leader is to assess the sergeant's level of commitment and competence for the task we're asking her to complete. Does she believe she can do the task? And does she possess the skills to complete the task? If this is the sergeant's first time performing this task, she might welcome a higher level of direction. Or worse, she might suffer from ignorant exuberance. That is, she is so excited to be working at the job, she hasn't fully realized she has no idea how to do the job. On the other hand, if she has accomplished this or similar tasks several times before, she might resent being provided a higher level of direction. Let's talk about stretch goals for a minute. These are goals that are beyond what is reasonable to expect from a typical team. That is to say, they stretch the team in order to accomplish it. There are 2 main advantages to stretch goals. The first is that it helps the team understand our longer-term objective. The second is that a portion of the population derives a great sense of accomplishment from achieving what others thought too difficult, which can increase team engagement. Please note, a stretch goal is different than a BHAG, or Big Hairy Audacious Goal, which the world was first introduced to in James Collins and Jerry Parasis's book, Built to Last. BHAGs are extreme stretch goals, targeting revolutionary change rather than expedited evolutionary change. BHAGs prompt the team to think differently about how to achieve the goal, which is expected to lead to a new and improved way of doing things. We'll talk more about BHAGs in later Vexplorations. We have to be careful when assigning stretch goals, as they do stretch the team, and we know at the start that they are unlikely to be accomplished with average effort. A company filled with people willing and eager to stretch will always do better than one filled with people who are not. So our long-term goal, as a leader, is to encourage stretch. Thus, setting a stretch goal and then severely penalizing a team who didn't reach the goal is counterproductive. We'll talk more about managing the risks associated with stretch goals in our upcoming Vexploration on risk management. Getting back to the goal given to our sergeant, was it a SMART goal? Specific. While the sergeant may have never erected a flagpole before, she has likely seen one before. So with this goal, an understanding of the final result is effectively communicated by saying, "Sergeant, put up this flagpole." However, if a common understanding didn't exist, then sufficient detail needs to be provided and questions need to be answered to develop it. Measurable. Our goal doesn't have a single metric associated with performance. However, we can define a checklist to use as a test to demonstrate sufficient performance has been met. Is the flagpole upright? And can I hoist a flag up to the top? Does the flag stay at the top? Does the pole fall over in a strong wind? Attainable. Does the sergeant have the skills to lead the team? Since she is the sergeant of the platoon, the answer is most likely yes. Does the team have the skills to perform the actions required to erect the flagpole? They know how to dig a hole. They can read the instructions printed on the bags of concrete. Are the materials and tools required to complete the task available? It wasn't covered in the story, but the shovels and concrete were beside the pole lying on the ground when the officers arrived at the site. Relevant. Most military organizations take great pride in their flags, so a flagpole is likely a centerpiece of the military base. The sergeant would know this, thus it's not necessary to explicitly discuss it. Time-bound. Is the timeline for completing the task within the realm of reality? No timeline has been discussed. This should have been part of the conversation, and the practicality of the timeline needs to be factored into determining if the goal is attainable. It was expected the sergeant would start right away, but no expectation was defined for when the job should be complete. Assuming both parties know how long a job like this should take, the target completion time may not need to be discussed. However, I'd recommend always agreeing on an expected completion time and date. Sergeant, put up this flagpole. I expect a flag flying on this pole by 0800 day after tomorrow.
Sir, yes, sir.
When assigning the goal to our sergeant, did we need to have a quality, quantity, time, and resource discussion with her? Always, but the discussion doesn't always have to be formal. There's only one flagpole, so quantity is clear. While we haven't defined the quality, parties involved would have a reasonably good understanding of the objectives. However, if you are one of those leaders who's going to pull out a level to check how straight the flagpole is, and the sergeant isn't familiar with your highly detailed and exacting nature, you should make them aware of it. We discussed time as part of the time-bound in SMART, and resources as part of attainable in SMART. Let's take a short detour and talk about rewards. Are rewards an effective way to increase the likelihood of successfully achieving a goal? If I set a more aggressive goal, can I increase the likelihood of achieving it by increasing the size of the performance incentive the individual receives for accomplishing the goal? While we'll talk more about performance incentives in a future Vexploration, let's take a minute to ensure we understand how rewards can drive counterproductive behavior. Have you heard of the Marshmallow Challenge? There is a great TED Talk by Tom Wojcik I'd recommend when you have 7 minutes and 22 seconds to fill. The Marshmallow Challenge is a competition between small teams to build a structure using spaghetti, tape, and string to hold a large marshmallow as high off the table as possible. Teams have 18 minutes to complete the challenge. At one point, Tom was interested to see how performance would change if large rewards were provided, so he offered a prize of $10,000 worth of software to the team that won. The result? 100% of the teams failed. If a single team had dumped the spaghetti on the table and placed the marshmallow on top, only getting the marshmallow 1 millimeter, or 1/32 of an inch, off the table, they would have won. Big rewards can drive excessive risk-taking. If you want to reward the team, set a small but meaningful performance incentive for achieving the goal. At the same time, also provide an equal or larger performance incentive for the larger team achieving the higher level goal. This will help discourage the team from behaviors that negatively impact the next larger goal. Now we have a shared understanding of a SMART goal. We have assigned it, and it is good as done by our agreed timeline, right? Maybe, but I don't think I'd bet the farm on that. While you go to the mess and drink your coffee, that doesn't mean you stop checking in on progress. While it would be nice to think of a goal as a fire-and-forget missile, the reality is, the path between the start and the finish line doesn't always unfold as expected. Perhaps the platoon starts digging and finds a very large rock, 3 inches or 8 centimeters, below the surface. Or an unexpected warhead that had been inadvertently buried decades ago. Or one of the men has a severe allergic reaction to the chemicals in the concrete dust. Maybe the team doesn't know how to put up a flagpole, and the pole goes up with a noticeable slant. This isn't a test where success or failure is evaluated at the end of the activity. As a leader, part of your job is to keep track of the progress to ensure the team is on track for success. When things get too far off track, what can you do to help the team recover without stepping in and taking over? May I suggest asking questions? Individual goals are only one stepping stone along the way to a larger objective. So when an individual goal doesn't go as planned, it impacts the larger objective it is part of. There are 2 key reasons for checking progress, so that when a goal gets off track, something can be done to get it back on track to minimize the impact this deviation will have on the larger objective. And plans for subsequent activities can be adapted based on new information to ensure effective and efficient use of resources. A word on accountability for team goals. Don't expect to hold teams accountable. When a team doesn't perform, who do you hold accountable? The entire team? Do you discipline or fire the entire team? Team accountability sounds like a nice utopian idea. In my experience, it doesn't work consistently. The team manager or leader has a goal and is accountable for it. The leader may share that goal with the team in an effort to motivate them and provide context. Team goals are a good tool. There is power in teams, and it is reasonable to expect team members to work together, share and contribute to planning and execution, back each other up, as well as acknowledge the role they played in the outcome. However, when it comes to accountability, assign one person accountability for achieving the goal. Give them the resources required to accomplish it, and hold them accountable for their commitment. Let them work with the team to define smaller interim goals to use to hold individual team members accountable. Goals are important, but they are only the first step towards accountability and effective delegation. In our next exploration, we're going to talk about developing a shared understanding of the driving factors behind the goals, the constraints, and the landscape between the start and the finish line in an effort to facilitate decision-making that is aligned throughout the organization. So the next time you set a goal for yourself or someone else, what are the 3 things that should be on your checklist? Is it a SMART goal? Specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. Have a discussion with the person being assigned the goal to agree on quality, quantity, resources, constraints, and timeline. Are the required skills for success available within the team being assigned? Or will learning and development need to occur? Ensure this is accounted for in the timeline, budget, and risk register. Check in on progress. This could be done formally through a periodic meeting or status report, or informally by stopping by. I recommend both. Remember the old Russian proverb, trust but verify, and go succeed. I'm Brent Peckover.